Today we're going to be doing something very different. Today we're going to be covering 10 very cheap wide receivers on DraftKings. And these are plays that are for multi-entry tournaments, those bigger tournaments where you're trying to win the big money. This is not for basic cash games where you're trying to set the optimal lineup. And it's really not for single entry tournaments unless you're trying to galaxy brain a wide receiver because you got a lot of studs there and you need a cheap guy to throw in. Obviously, this is not for redraft starts, and we're not looking at these players as starts even, but as cheaper players that have some upside, that might see some opportunities that could allow us to hit in our DFS lineups for this week on DraftKings here in week 13, because there are some indicators in the numbers in their situation that could allow them to go ham, and they're very cheap. The odds are also stacked against them immensely. That's why they're cheap. So that should be implied in there. So these are not starts. These are suggestions to help you build your lineups this weekend. So we're going to start things off, and we're going to go with two players here, Quinton Johnson and George Pickins, and we're going to start off at $5,000 and work our way down here. And what we like about this is the matchup with the Cardinals because of Kyler Murray, because he can push the game script a little bit. We have a 41.5 over-under, so a lower implied point total. It's a moderate implied point total exactly when you compare to lower scoring games. That being said, I could see one of these wide receivers hitting this week. The Cardinals have allowed 5 wide receivers to score 20 or more fantasy points this season, which is on the high end. You can throw in the Cardinals a little bit. They're middle of the road overall from a macro sense. However, they do allow some upside weeks. We could see that with Quinton Johnson at his price tag here at $5,000. You're getting a wide receiver who's pushing about 25 to 30% target share on any given week in a matchup where the ball might be moving back and forth a good bit. And then George Pickens is a pure upside play against a defense who's allowed some upside weeks to wide receivers. It's also good to run on the Cardinals. That could slow things down. But again, you're not betting huge. And these are going to be the highest bets here that we're going to talk about today. Now we're going to be looking at Jeudy here. Very cheap, $4,700. He's questionable though. Sean Payton said he's not too concerned, but still we're looking into that. As a consolation prize, if he is out, Marvin Mims at $3,300. Marvin Mims is built for DFS, but what we like about this matchup, pretty much for both these wide receivers, and really depends on circumstance and how much you're willing to spend here, is CJ Stroud on the other end, pushing the game script. Vegas has a 47.5 over-under. I see a lot of people making stacks with this matchup. I also see Jeudy being used a lot here, but still at the price, he could allow you to sneak in some other wide receivers, some running backs that are higher priced, that are more locks with upside. That being said, if CJ Stroud, like he usually does, pushes the game script and causes the Denver Broncos to have to run with them and pushes the pace, we could see a get-right game here with Jeudy. As we know, he's been up and down with a lot of downs this season, but this is DFS. We're looking at one particular game here, at a cheaper player that could allow us to stuff more expensive players into our roster and allow us to be a little bit different, a little bit more contrarian compared to the rest of the lineups in the tournament. That being said, we're betting on CJ Stroud here by going with Jeudy because we're implying that the game script could get pushed. Vegas is saying that as well. I look for Jeudy to have a higher roster rate, especially if he's playing this matchup. If not, I'm looking at Marvin Mims as a dart throw, a deep ball candidate, because he's built for best ball. He's built for DFS. He's built for these one-time matchups where he's running some routes, getting some opportunities. Over his last 3 games, we've seen an increase in his snaps. He's not a bet in basic redraft or for your lineups, but guys like this and matchups like this where you're trying to take that gamble to really make an impact everywhere else in your lineup, trying to play the prices, this is something you may want to look at here. Now we're looking at Jahan Dotson and also Curtis Samuel. Kind of lump them together here. Dotson at $4,600, Samuel at 4,100, and the Dolphins have allowed 5 games of 20 fantasy points or more to wide receivers. They're 10th worst in the league at allowing fantasy points to wide receivers at 36.5 per game. Not all of that's going to Terry McLaurin. This is going to get spread around a good bit. The Dolphins are going to push the pace here. They're going to score at will. That being said, Washington's going to have to come back. I'm going to see a lot of stacks made from this matchup, and you can make a lot of stacks in this matchup as well. But if I'm making a ton of lineups here, I want some Jahan Dotson. I want some Curtis Samuel. Maybe stacks with Howe. Maybe with them as run backs with some Dolphins. But I'm really stacking this game. But I'm not going to be overexposed either because I know the chalk is looking at this matchup as well. But when I think about these two players, they're chalky, cheap players who go on runs, who do have some upside, who hit every so often, and I want some of them in my lineups. Now we're looking at Quinton Johnson. Nobody likes Quinton Johnson in redraft. Nobody wants to set lineups with Quinton Johnson. That's understandable, but he's running a lot of routes, seeing a lot of opportunities here, and he's just salaried at $4,000 against the Patriots, who do not allow many upside games. Keenan Allen hasn't practiced much this week, if at all. He's been out, might be out this week, might not. Remember, he's an older veteran, and they get a little bit of extra grace during the week. We're watching his status. But again, with a wide receiver like this who runs a lot of routes and an offense that can push in the air, even though they don't do it every week, you could really see him do some things at a cheap price tag. In redraft, you're staying away. In these max entry tournaments where you're trying to get a little creative because you're setting like 50 lineups or you're spreading around your lineups in other tournaments, you're going to be looking at Quinton Johnson as a piece to allow you to get over that bridge for those higher priced players to help you out. And if you need another bridge, let's look at Greg Dortch because he's listed at $3,700, super cheap. Once you get this low in price, anything can happen. He's running routes he hit on the last 2 weeks, so maybe we can get a third game in a row. He's also playing against the Steelers here, who allowed 4 games of 20-plus fantasy points to wide receivers. They're 12th worst in the league at allowing fantasy points to wide receivers at 36.2 PPR points per game. So again, they're allowing fantasy production. They're allowing these wide receivers to do some things. Vegas has this game at 41.5 over-under, but he's so cheap, and you got other players in your lineup that are straight-up hitters that you feel good about, but you need that cheap play. Greg Dortch might be that bridge to that gap. Elijah Moore is a player you don't like in redraft because he hasn't been hitting. But at cost, at $3,500, you're buying a wide receiver who's getting a 20% target share, a 20.5% target share over the last 3 weeks. He had a dip in target share a few weeks ago, but overall, he's been flirting with the 20% range all year long. That could lead to production on any given matchup, especially with the new quarterback changes and just with the price alone, the matchup alone here, just the volatility, the target share. You're not going to see many 20% target share wide receivers listed at this range. You might as well take that chance if you get one at this price tag. A.T. Perry's a guy to look at. We got questions about Chris Olave right now due to the concussion. He's been practicing at a limited capacity, but he's got to get cleared. Rashid Shaheed has not been practicing. He might not be able to play, and we're seeing an increase in workload with A.T. Perry. He's dirt cheap at $3,300. We got a matchup here against the Lions at home, 47 over-under. We could be seeing some extra workload here. He's seen 6 targets in his last 2 games. You don't want to bet on that, but you're not betting at $3,300. You're using him as a stopgap to throw in those more expensive players as that piece to help you get over that hump. He could be a player to do so, especially if Chris Olave's out, Rashid Shaheed's out, or Chris Olave's in and Shaheed's out. You might be looking at him in general, especially if your lineups are configured in that way. Jonathan Mingo, questionable with an injury, could be out. We're also looking at DJ Chark in this situation because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a pass funnel defense. You do not want to run on them. We see that in the stats. Teams like to throw deep on them. This plays well in the Chark, but he has not been hitting well. Jonathan Mingo has been seeing a 19% target share over his last few games. He's been seeing a ramp up in targets. He had a double-digit PPR fantasy performance last week, and he's priced at $3,300. If he's in, running routes, seeing snaps, he could be a gamble at that price tag, considering this matchup is very soft for the wide receiver position, which could elevate his performance. If he's out, slam that button on DJ Chark. I mentioned Terrace Marshall. He wasn't activated last week. If he's activated, and if you really want to go cheap, maybe, but I'm not going to trust it. But really, I'm not trusting anybody in this video anyways. Juju SmithSchuster, $3,200. And Demario Douglas might be out this week. And that being said, Juju SmithSchuster has been next in line in targets, although it has not been much. But the flow of targets is going to have to move around. You got the Chargers coming in. The ball's going to be moved around a little bit. We got a moderate implied point total at 40 here from Vegas. That being said, we're looking at Juju SmithSchuster to see some targets. He's dirt cheap. You can also look at Devontae Parker, Tyquan Thornton, those players as well if you don't like Juju in this offense. But remember, we're not gambling on him. We're using him as a bridge to get to our more expensive players to really stack our rosters, and also can be very contrarian too if the Patriots have to throw the ball and some targets go to Juju or Devontae or to Tyquan if Demario Douglas is out, because Demario Douglas was seeing a 20+% target share. If he's out of this contest, then those targets got to go somewhere else. You may want to look at those wide receivers and see what's up. Those are 10 cheap wide receivers on DraftKings that you can throw in your lineups. Remember, these are for large max entry tournaments where you really have to get creative to beat the field there, really be contrarian on some of your lineup decisions. But still, those are some options to come over. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the way out. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.